What's happening to the country? I'd like to know. I mean, it feels as though our individual freedoms are slowly but surely being chipped away at. I'll tell you, Ron Paul has an idea of what's going on with this country. I've known Ron for many years, many years, and he's terrific. He's very consistent in that he's a big believer in small government. You know me, live free or die, New Hampshire. You can actually get this at the shop, at the Trish Regan shop. Just go to trishregan.shop. Live free or die. It's the motto of where I grew up. It's like the first thing I could read. You're like this high and you're looking at all the license plates when you go to the grocery store with your mom and you see live free or die. It makes an impression, let me tell you. So Ron Paul is very much of that ilk. And he's a big believer in small government, big believer in gold, by the way. Shout out to our friends at Legacy. Ron Paul said he knows the day we lost our government. He can actually pinpoint the day when we lost our government to this sort of alleged ethereal deep state. And he sat down with my former colleague over at Fox, Tucker Carlson, and he did this interview and he said, I can pinpoint the day. I want you to see this because it's interesting. We can talk about it. In fact, so many of you were sort of tweeting about it and I saw some messages about it last night. And I'm like, what's everybody going on about with the day we lost our government? And it's interesting. Take a listen.
The date I say it was concrete that there was a coup and we lost our government was November 22nd.
Yes.
The assassination of Kennedy.
That was 60 years ago. Yeah. And our lawmakers never.
The date I say it was concrete that there was a coup and we lost our government was November 22nd.
Yes.
The assassination of Kennedy.
That was 60 years ago. Yeah. And our lawmakers never talk about it.
But you mentioned to me earlier and brought back in memory, but do you know who they appointed to the commission? Alan Dulles.
He was on the Warren Commission.
Yeah.
So the guy who's responsible for the murder.
He probably was
okay, well, that's a big
investigating the murder.
That's dawned on me. The Republic is gone.
We're going down a little bit of a rabbit hole. We'll get to it.
The date I say it was concrete that there was a coup.
Ron Paul's making the point that Dulles, who was in charge of the Warren investigation and committee, he happened to be the first head of the CIA. And so when he's saying this is the day we lost our government, it's the day that we got the Central Intelligence Organization. And Dulles was director of the Central Intelligence. And so that's, to Tucker's point, the conspiracy is that somehow that U.S. government in some way, shape, or form was involved in the assassination. Now, that's a fascinating topic for another day. But I just think it's interesting that he's saying effectively that's when big government sort of came in and took charge. And you think about what happens, right? Every 4 years, you maybe shuttle in a new president, maybe you don't. But what does happen is that the system keeps going. And they have certain policies in place, especially on the international front. I mean, U.S. tax policy and stuff, that's stuff that maybe they consider domestic, but the deep state kind of takes care of the big issues. It's why you didn't even know this. We just found out publicly the other day, courtesy of the New York Times, gigantic report. I mean, I printed it out. It was like a 23-page PDF file. We had the CIA running an op in Ukraine since 2014. So since the Maidan Revolution, the CIA has been actively involved, and they were under strict orders to not have it escalate to where, it's escalated to. So they never told us. They were over there running this op. There's all kinds of things, right, that go on. And so this op was going on even when Trump was there. And the reality is, their feeling is, I guess presidents come and go. That's just, the people electing, the people. But the machine is there to have some continuity. Now, on the one hand, you could say maybe you need that, right? You need some continuity because you don't want to have whiplash constantly, and you don't necessarily want other countries thinking that our word is not consistent because of that whiplash. But what happens after, as Tucker points out, after 60 years? I mean, it becomes so entrenched that you're dealing with the opposite of whiplash. And so along comes Donald Trump and he's like, well, wait a second, I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense. And, maybe we ought to be using our influence, our economic influence, more aggressively. Maybe it's not okay that all these countries get away with not paying their fair share, so to speak. I mean, before you go after Americans, oh, you're not paying your fair share. By the way, Hunter's not. Maybe you ought to go after Germany for not paying its fair share, or France for not paying its fair share. And we're going to have a whole NATO alliance, right? You're supposed to contribute 2% of GDP, and nobody's doing it. Nobody's doing it but us, and we're contributing more. So you can see why he is so despised and he is so hated, because he's blowing the lid off of everything in real time. They've got 60 years of working hard, according to Ron Paul. It is the day we lost our government, right? So if you want to go with that theory and you think that the deep state effectively took over in a massive way and they're running the show, certainly on the international side, then they can't have this guy come along out of nowhere and say, no, I'm getting rid of that. I want to tax Chinese imports at a bigger level because I don't think they're playing fair. And I'm not okay with giving billions more to Ukraine because I think it's being squandered. I mean, look at the Department of Defense head there in Ukraine who got caught siphoning off millions off the top along with his deputy. I mean, if you do this, then you're rocking the boat in a way that's very problematic for them. And so this is why they are doing everything they can. And by the way, it's not just sort of the deep, when you're talking about the deep state, so to speak, you've also got media involved as well. I mean, the media organizations that just despise him. And I'm like, guys, hey, he's actually like one of the first people that came along that actually tells the truth a lot, like maybe too much. Really. I mean, occasionally he just gets himself in too much trouble because he did. I mean, I think back to what happened with coronavirus, and was it either April or May of 2020 where he's like, yeah, I've heard some intelligence that it could have come from a Wuhan lab. And the deep state, quote unquote, went bonkers, and the media went bonkers. And then it turns out that everybody except for the CIA, I guess, is in agreement. All the other 3-letter agencies, they're all in agreement that, yeah, you know what, this thing was derived out of the Wuhan lab in China, where they were actually working with, quite irresponsibly, obviously, and allegedly we were giving them the money to do it, $600,000 to come from U.S. taxpayers. They say, oh, it's not a lot of money, but you know what? So much as one dime is a lot of money, frankly, when you don't have any kind of control over what's going on in the lab. And we knew that because they had actually done a report on Taiwanese Chinese TV where they went back and looked at some of the reporting that happened in China at the time, and they were so proud that they didn't even wear the right protective gear. Come on. I mean, why were we giving any money to a lab like that? So it goes on and on and on, and unravels and unravels and unravels, and what you find is not very pretty.